British Museum, home to some of the greatest treasures on Earth. But not all of them have been discovered by experts.
Every single year, over 70,000 pieces of treasure are discovered by you, the British public, in rivers and gardens and fields and underneath floorboards right across the country, and then submitted here to the British Museum's Portable Antiquities Scheme.
Some of them are gold and silver, but more often than not, they're everyday items that have been dropped by the people who walked this land before us. All of them have got a story to tell.
And on tonight's show, we're looking at treasures that symbolise power and wealth.
On tonight's show, a medieval gold ring with a bloody legacy.
A litany of death that would soon include our ring bearer, William Herbert.
And a sword so mighty it had its own burial.
This is one of the swords that conquered the north.
Yes, this sword could be key to the history of Northumbria as we know it.
But first, a case of mistaken identity, when some pieces, seemingly of scrap metal, opened the door on a story of global power and destruction. Mariana Cotter went off to investigate.
In 2010, recycling plant worker Steve Allenby made a discovery in a field near Lincoln, unlike anything he'd ever seen before.
I dug down and recovered a piece of copper alloy. And I examined the copper alloy and I thought this is very unusual, and dug up a further 2 or 3 more pieces, and I thought we're definitely onto something here.
The field Steve was searching is next to RAF Scampton. In fact, the airbase was home to the World War II heroes who flew the Dambuster raids. Could the lumps of metal that Steve uncovered have been shrapnel left over from a Second World War bomber? He took them to archaeologist Adam Daubney to find out more.
So these are the fragments. So what are they?
Well, when Steve first brought these into me, I kind of looked at him and thought, this is an unimpressive group of exploded munitions.
But the scraps Steve had found were much more exciting than war debris.
After a bit of research, we've actually found that these are part of a 2,000-year-old statue of a horse.
Wow. So 2,000 years old puts us round about Roman?
In the Roman period, at the very beginning of the Roman period.
Goodness me. How can you tell it's a horse?
Well, this is the piece that gave it all away, really.
Yeah, I can't really work out what shape that makes, though.
So that fragment is actually part of the neck.
Oh, so that's its kind of...
Yeah.
And its body's here and its head's going to be here.
That's
or its
right.
neck's going to be here.
Yeah. And these fragments are part of the horse's mane.
It's golden.
That's right, it's got gilding all over it.
So it would have actually had glowing golden hair. That would have been quite an impressive sight.
Incredibly, these 10 fragments of scrap metal tell us that a life-sized horse made of bronze and gold stood somewhere in Roman Lincoln.
And do we know whether this was just a horse on its own, or whether it had a rider or a chariot or something?
Yeah, we're pretty certain that an emperor would have sat on this horse. It's a horse fit for a king, really.
And Adam has an idea who that king may have been. In the late 1st century AD, the Romans ruled over much of Europe and northern Africa, and at the head was the Emperor Domitian. Domitian was said to be a tyrant known for cruelty and extravagance. On the edge of the empire, Lincoln had been founded during Domitian's rule. According to tradition, a golden statue of him would have probably been built at the centre to demonstrate the reach of his power. This is what it would have looked like. The statue would have been an imposing sight. But Domitian's thirst for power was to be his downfall.
Domitian was power crazy. In fact, he asked people to call him master and god, which kind of made him unpopular with the Senate. And if you get on the wrong side of the Senate, basically, you get assassinated.
The all-powerful Senate had him killed off by one of his own bodyguards.
But even if he was assassinated, why would they destroy his statue?
Well, after he was assassinated, the Senate decreed something called damnatio memoriae, which basically means damnation of the memory. And what the Senate wanted to do was erase every memory of Domitian, including our statue.
But little did the Romans know that nearly 2,000 years later, we would be able to piece back together the statue they tried to destroy.
In Rome, some of these great statues do still exist, but in the wider empire, including Britain, very little survives, and even less survives of the Emperor Domitian. But even though the Romans tried to erase him, thanks to these fragments, we haven't forgotten him.
This is the Sutton Hoo sword, and it's part of an Anglo-Saxon burial discovered in 1939. Now, it's really, really rare to find swords from this period. So our next discovery from Northumberland is genuinely exceptional, as actor James Purfoy found out.
I've always loved swords. Even as a kid, I'd choose a sword over a gun any day. They always struck me as an honest weapon, one you'd use when you were looking right into the eye of the man who was going to kill you. And names like Excalibur filled me with wonder. Notions of heroic and brave warriors on some kind of extraordinary quest. But a recent discovery in Alnwick, in the northeast of England, has got me really excited. In 2012, a metal detectorist who wishes to remain anonymous dug up what looked like a lump of scrap metal. But when archaeologists saw it, they were so excited that they launched a dig to find out more. Rob Collins is the lead archaeologist.
So, Rob, tell us, what was found here?
But what's brought us all up here, really, is this sword.
Come on, Rob, doesn't look much like a sword to me.
If you look at it like this, we have this nice rectangle.
Okay.
You have the curve, follow it around like that. So imagine it's all straightened out.
And is there anything else on there that gives us any kind of clue?
The key is right in here. That's a small patch of pattern welding. And it's that sort of patterned metalworking that you really find with swords.
This is what the sword would have looked like when it was new. It would have taken a skilled blacksmith weeks to forge and cost over £250,000 in today's money. But what's been done to this 1,400-year-old blade makes it truly exceptional. How come a sword ends up like an old gnarly bit of metal like this?
What's happened, we think this has accompanied an important man, an important warrior or leader in burial. And so as the man's been buried, so has his sword. But to do that, they've killed the sword first. They gave the sword to a smith, he took it to his forge, he reheated it, and hammered it into this curved shape.
To make it completely unusable?
Indeed. So as the warrior dies, so does his sword.
Okay. Can I hold it?
Please.
Ooh, it's got a real weight to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, if it was straight, it would definitely kill you.
Killing a sword was a ritual to honor only the most powerful and revered men in the country. It meant that nobody else would ever be able to use it. Would you say this is a rare find, or a commonplace in England, or?
This is, as far as I'm aware, the only example of its type known in England. We know about ritually killed weapons from the continent, from the Viking period in Britain. But yeah, for early Anglo-Saxon England, as far as I'm aware, this is the only one of its type, so this is very rare.
Swords were highly prized possessions that were often passed down through the generations or taken as spoils of battle. And clearly this sword belonged to a great and noble warrior. The Anglo-Saxon owner of this sword lived in the 6th century. At this time, Britain was divided into many kingdoms, each one fighting the others to try and grab more land and power. To truly understand what it was like to be an Anglo-Saxon warrior, I'm going to put my sword-wielding skills to the test against a skilled expert. So how long would it take to become fully proficient?
To be able to push forward no matter what the opposition is very, very difficult to do.
Well, imagine with all the kit on, I mean, how much would that weigh?
He's probably carrying about 60 pounds of kit, say 40 kilos. And of course, you're not.
I'm not. I'm out of breath already. You're a fit man. I yield to you, sir. You're the first man who's made me do that on film for quite some time, I can assure you. This is the only example of an Anglo-Saxon sword that has been ritually killed in Britain. And Rob has a theory about whom it may have belonged to.
Well, we have this great character in the history of Northumbria, Ida, essentially the founding king of Northumbria. He would have rode out with his companions, his bodyguard, conquering the countryside, bringing everyone under his sway.
So there is a distinct possibility that this is one of the swords that conquered the north.
Yes, this sword could be key to the history of Northumbria as we know it.
This sword could well have been one of the great swords of British history. For it to be killed in this way, it must have had a character and a personality all of its own. So to me, this gnarly lump of metal is a true British treasure.
Still to come, we unravel the story of one of the biggest rings ever found in Britain and delve into the grisly world of Victorian dentistry.
You really did take your life into your hands when you went to see the dentist.
Welcome back. We're celebrating the hidden treasures that you, the British public, have discovered. But now for something a little bit different.
This exhibition shows the 14,000 or so drugs that the average Brit takes over his or her lifetime. But we are going to take you back 170 years to a time before reliable medicine was widely available. Back then, even if you had wealth or status, you did not want to get ill. You didn't even want toothache, as our next item reveals.
The city of Manchester. Alan Mort spends his day working for Manchester United, but in his spare time he searches for artefacts. And while in the Yorkshire countryside, he came across something bizarre.
Dug it up, I looked at it, I thought, a set of horse teeth here in the middle of nowhere. First of all, I thought it was lead. I was just wondering, how would you get these in your mouth?
The item Alan had found looked like teeth, and they came from the 1800s, a time when you would avoid going to the dentist at all costs.
Prior to modern dentistry, you really did take your life into your hands when you went to see the dentist, mainly down to the fact that a lot of the tools and equipment weren't sterilised, so you would have run a very high risk of infection. And also there's the shock of having someone pull a tooth out and break your jaw in order to extract it.
And a broken jaw was the least of your worries if you went to the various charlatans who could offer you treatment on a budget.
Dentistry was practiced by barber surgeons, blacksmiths, wig makers, and also what's known as roving teeth extractors, who would have dressed up as in a jester outfit with strings of human teeth around their neck, and they would be the ones to go and actually pull out teeth.
But what about our object? Just what was it used for?
What we're looking at with this object is a mould for making dentures. It's what's known as a swaging block.
An impression of the patient's teeth was taken and then turned into our copper swaging block. The block acts as an exact replica of the patient's mouth, which the dentist can use to build a set of dentures. And it looks like our man was in desperate need of some new teeth.
From the 17th century onwards, dentures are made from a variety of different materials, and this includes ivory, wood, and porcelain. The best forms of replacement teeth in dentures were actually either human teeth or animal teeth. Human teeth were generally preferred, and these came from a variety of different sources. One of the common ones being from the poor, because they would actually sell their teeth so they could put bread on the table and feed their family. You also have what are known as Waterloo teeth. And these are teeth that are robbed out of the corpses on battlefields like Waterloo and actually shipped back to London.
This object shows that not all treasure has to be gold or silver. It's a fascinating curiosity that connects us to our recent past, less than 200 years ago.
The word treasure often conjures up images of gold. And that's partly because gold is so rare, but it's also because the metal has an almost magic quality to it.
It's because gold doesn't tarnish. Bury it for 1,000 years and it's as shiny when it comes out of the ground as when it went in. If you're ever lucky enough to find it, it's something you'll never, ever forget.
In 1998, in the foothills of the Brecon Beacons in Wales, local man Ron Treadgold made an extraordinary discovery. An enormous gold ring that could only have belonged to someone of serious power and wealth. I want to see this ring for myself, so I'm meeting Dr. Mark Redknapp from the National Museum of Wales.
Wow. I mean, the size really strikes you.
It's about 47 grams of gold.
And it's so elaborately worked. I mean, it's really beautiful. That looks to me like that's very late medieval.
Yes, we're probably here looking at a mid-15th century ring.
And it's key, isn't it, that often these bits of jewellery were kind of, they multitasked in the late medieval periods. This is a job of work to do.
Yes, it's a signet ring for making seals.
This ring would have been used to seal documents and letters, the imprint in wax acting like a signature.
There we have a sealed document.
Proof it came from the hand of the ring bearer. So when the experts looked closely at the seal this ring made, they were able to see a clue as to who might have worn it. Clearly visible are the initials W and A.
So who are W and A?
It was found about 600 metres south of Raglan Castle, and at that time was occupied by William Herbert, who'd married Anne Devereux.
He was a Welsh warlord and played a crucial role in the Wars of the Roses. This was a conflict between two powerful dynasties. On one side, the Lancastrians, on the other, the Yorkists, all fighting to rule England. The wars raged for over 30 years and the throne passed between the two families. Tens of thousands died in battle. William Herbert was an important general for the Yorkists, and when they were in power, they rewarded him handsomely for his loyalty, with wealth and status. So what was he really like? I've come to Raglan Castle to see where he lived.
It's a real statement building, a really show-off building. He has to have this as a statement of his power, his wealth, his influence and his position in society.
But it is great coming here because this is such an impressive building. But also, isn't it fantastic that that little ring was found? So it's a kind of added bit to the jigsaw puzzle of this story.
Absolutely, and if it is truly William Herbert's ring, then it does give us another sense of the man, not just the committed soldier, the courtier, the politician, but also the husband and the lover.
It's rare to find anything gold, but what's really special about Ron Treadgold's discovery is that it reveals an intimate detail of William Herbert's life, the strength of his bond with his wife Anne. Sadly, their union would meet a tragic end. In 1468, it looked as if the Wars of the Roses were over. William Herbert was made Earl of Pembroke. But soon, the conflict reignited, laying waste to scores of the nation's nobility. A litany of death that would soon include our ring bearer, William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke. Summoned to fight for the Yorkists, he was captured in battle by the Lancastrians and then executed in cold blood. The Wars of the Roses finally came to an end in 1485. We'll never know how the Raglan ring was lost, but it's a remarkable link to one player from the bloodiest periods in British history. Now housed in the National Museum of Wales in Cardiff, this ring might be worth tens of thousands of pounds, but what it's added to our history is priceless. And all thanks to one man who devoted his spare time to finding it.
Now, it's pretty rare to find complete bits of armour or weaponry like this one in the ground because it often gets damaged by battle or the elements, which makes our next item truly special.
Don't tell anyone, but I'm an absolute history geek. I keep a metal detector in the back of my car at all times. For me, happiness is snuffling around in a muddy field.
An Iron Age trowel, made in Sheffield.
Only I have never, ever found anything exciting, ever. But recently I heard about an intriguing treasure dug up near my home in Kent. This I have to investigate. Just last year, close to Canterbury in Kent, retired plumber Trevor came across a most unusual find.
Oh, you never know, do you?
What did you think it was when you found it?
Originally, the signal sounded like a tin, you know, a very good signal, which you normally get with an old tin can, but when I moved the loose dirt away, I could see this green outline, and it was in a circle, and then when I disturbed it, there was a bit of bone in there. I could see a bit of bone, and I knew that there was something pretty serious there and big.
It was made of some kind of metal, curved in a dome, with 3 small holes around the edge. What could it be? Trevor took it to Andrew Richardson of the Canterbury Archaeological Trust to see what he thought.
As an archaeologist, you know, through your career, you get some amazing objects and stuff, but this was definitely one of the best. It's definitely one that I'll always remember.
Andrew identified this rare find as a bronze helmet, dated to about the 1st century BC. So, where is it from and who did it belong to? There's a clue in the date it was buried. It was at a time in our history when Iron Age Britain was about to change beyond all recognition.
2,000 years ago, on this coastline, a group of men lined up on these very cliffs, watching a fleet of Roman galleys led by Julius Caesar prepare to invade.
So if you had to put money on it, is it a Roman helmet?
It's probably made in Gaul. It's definitely not made in Britain. It is possible that it's acquired in Kent when Caesar actually does one of his raids into Kent in 55 or 54 BC and has some battles with the locals. It is possible that that's how the helmet came into somebody's possession living around here.
So it could have been when Caesar did one of his raids,
yeah.
He could have come up and then attacked a village, and the chief warrior has a fight for about a week, a fight to the death with the Roman, slaying him and taking his helmet.
So we think this may be a Roman helmet, but there's still one more mystery to uncover. As when it was excavated, there was another discovery, a small bronze treasure. This was revealed to be an English Iron Age brooch. This is odd because at such a turbulent time in British history, we've got a Roman helmet buried in England in what experts say is a traditional Iron Age burial site. Intriguing. So who was buried in the helmet? When Andrew uncovered it, there were fragments of bone lodged inside. Could this be a British chieftain? I need a bone man.
Right, now it's time to go all forensic and CSI.
This is Daniel Antoine, curator of human remains at the British Museum.
That's the helmet there.
That's a wonderful helmet.
It is incredible. It looks like an old GPO helmet. And these are the remains that were found in the helmet?
Absolutely. In the case of a cremation, we're left with very small fragments.
So can you tell if this is a man or a woman?
Well, you look at different things for sexing. You can see that both these individuals have got a flat forehead.
Yeah.
Which you tend to find in females.
So is this a female?
We haven't got enough, really, to say.
You know, if you had to go one way or the other.
It's really difficult, but the hints I'm getting from the skull suggest it's most likely to be a female individual.
Now, we tend to think of all soldiers as being men, but contemporary classical records show that Celtic Iron Age women were just as fierce, strong, and as respected as their male counterparts. Indeed, the most famous Briton to fight the Romans was Boudicca, queen of the Iceni tribe. Boudicca led 100,000 British warriors to attack London and other Roman cities, killing over 70,000 in 60 AD. And to this day, a defiant statue of Boudicca stands by the Houses of Parliament. So, I reckon that our Roman helmet may well have been the war trophy of a fierce British woman who encountered the Romans in Kent.
In fact, Julius Caesar said of the Cantiaci tribe, the people of Kent, they are the most civilized people in Britain. What a brown nose he was! But having lived here for a couple of decades, I can confirm that he's perfectly right. Thank you all.
This is the Money Gallery at the British Museum. It tells the story of money down the ages.
Now, we all know that we're living through the consequences of a global financial meltdown, but if you thought that was a modern phenomenon, then think again. Historian Tom Holland reveals all.
In 2007, local man Barry Seeger was out for the very first time. He was in a field near Hadrian's Wall, where he made a sensational discovery.
It's my first time out, and it was my first ever find, and it was like winning the lottery.
But it wasn't a lottery win Barry had found, and it wasn't gold or silver. Instead, it was 8 Roman copper coins, and their value lay in the story they had to tell. I've come to Hadrian's Wall to find out more.
Well, Philippa, I've got here the coins that Barry found. What makes them valuable for us? In what sense, in our terms, are they treasure?
Well, what I think is really interesting about them is nearly 1,600 years before the introduction of the euro, you've got coins that were used pretty much everywhere in the Roman Empire. So whether you were a merchant in Constantinople, a citizen of Rome, or somebody stationed right out here on Hadrian's Wall, you still recognise these coins and be able to use them.
In January 2002, 17 European nations formally scrapped their own national currencies and adopted one single currency, the euro. The euro was set up to simplify trade and movement across Europe, but it wasn't the first time this had been attempted. The Romans had done a very similar thing 1700 years earlier with their own single currency, the nummus. The empire stretched from Scotland to Arabia, and the nummus was a way to unite what was then a whole hodgepodge of local currencies and bartering systems. But the similarities don't end there.
So just like the euro today, which has a standardised design on one side, and then on the other side a little representation of the country from which it's come, these coins also have that information on them.
The euro has lasted for just over a decade now, but Roman coinage was used for centuries. One of the reasons it lasted so long was that, unlike today's EU, the currency and the empire were administered by a single government. Power that today's leaders can only dream of. But by AD 400, Roman government was fragmenting. The empire was starting to crumble. And as the Romans left, they took the nummus with them. Britain was plunged into the Dark Ages. Now, this coin may not look much, but I think there is something really rather chilling about it. This is actually what a real financial crisis looks like. We're not talking about a currency collapse. What we're talking about is the end of currency in Britain, full stop. With no money, trade collapsed, cities were abandoned, the whole of civilization fell apart, leaving Britain as the prey of violent warlords. I mean, it is quite simply the most devastating economic meltdown that Britain has ever gone through. And I guess we just have to hope that the euro, at any rate, doesn't suffer a similar fate.
The Romans dominated British culture for close on 400 years and left so many objects for us to discover. The most common Roman find is a coin, but every so often something turns up that bewilders the experts.
Here in 2008, buried under a farmer's field in Siston, Lincolnshire, a man called David Barker chanced upon a very, very odd find. It's about 6 centimetres long, made of bronze, with what looks like 3 sculpted figures. David showed it to his local finds liaison officer, who dated the treasure to the 4th century AD. This is the late Roman period in Britain. So what exactly were they up to at that time?
Gladiators fighting to the death, legions tramping across Europe, banquets and blood, and sex, of course.
Indeed, on taking a closer look, they were surprised to see some rather rude goings-on.
It's certainly an object that raises a few eyebrows now. But what did the Romans use it for?
I've come to the city of Lincoln, where the find is now on display at the Collection Museum.
Anthony, what is it?
It's a Roman knife handle, dating to the 4th century AD. You can see the bronze handle, the iron blade is the bit that's now missing.
Hardly dare ask you, what does it actually show?
It's quite an unusual image, isn't it, for a knife handle? Yes, we basically have
is.
3 figures. A male figure here, there's a female in the centre, she's kind of got her legs up over his waist, kind of straddling him. And then, quite unusually, there's a smaller male figure that she's got her arms wrapped around his back, so they're kind of clinging on to each other. And then the particularly unusual part about this handle is the severed head that the younger male is holding in his hand.
Raunchy, though, isn't it?
It is, quite unusual, yeah. A black...
Erotic imagery was commonplace in day-to-day Roman life, but I'm still mystified as to why this knife shows such a provocative scene. A similar find by the old Roman amphitheatre in St Albans may hold the key.
Just as we come out of theatres today, we can buy T-shirts and we can buy souvenir magazines and so on. It might be the case that this was a little token souvenir from a theatrical scene or play.
What sort of theatrical production would it have been that this would have been a suitable souvenir to take away from the theatre?
What we do know is that from Lincolnshire, we've also had Roman knife handles that depict scenes from classical myths. Perhaps something similar was going on with this erotic knife handle. My view is that this represents a well-understood fertility scene. I don't think it's sexual in the sense that we would think about it today. I think it's more to do with the ideas of rebirth, of fertility and renewal than it is about erotic art.
So if this is a souvenir, it must be depicting an ancient myth. But there's no Roman or classical myth that involves 3 people and a severed head, so experts think this is evidence of a Celtic Iron Age story. There's written evidence that Celtic warriors would cut off and display the head of their enemies, and often 3 figures feature in Celtic mythology. So this little treasure is not just an oddity, it represents a merging of 2 great cultures, the Romans and the Celts.
Now, our first item is an 800-year-old badge. It was found in Scotland, but it's got a design that could be seen right across Britain today.
Today, the question of an independent Scotland, breaking the ties that have united Britain for hundreds of years, is back. Now it's going to be answered by a vote, a referendum to be held here next year. In the past, it was answered by battle, with warriors like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce passing into Scottish legend. Today, I'm investigating a treasure that sheds a new light on the turbulent relationship between these 2 great nations.
Here in Galloway, a chance discovery was made in the ruins of an old monastery. Fraser Richardson is a postman, but he spends his free time looking for artifacts. It was while searching near Kirkcudbright that he found what looked like a small badge.
Put my shovel in, dug it out. It was about 6 inches down. When I cleaned it a wee bit, and I seen the red enamelling, and I thought, this must be a pretty good find, this one. So I didn't clean it anymore, put it back in my pouch, and went to the museum that day, and they found out it was about 800 years old, and probably the best find ever.
When the experts had a look at it, they found something truly remarkable beneath the dirt. I've come to the Stuart Museum to take a look for myself.
Well, David, what is it?
Well, Michael, it is a little heraldic badge, and it's the 3 lions of the Royal Arms of England. It would originally have had a nice deep red background. You can see some traces of the red enamel. The lions themselves would probably have been gilded. So imagine a yellow or gold on red. As a panel, it would be fitted to perhaps a leather bag, a leather satchel, and it would be clearly identify that object as part of the royal household.
And it tells us something extraordinary about Edward I. Richard Oram has a theory.
He's here, he's moving about, he's on horseback, and things like that can easily detach. It could come off his own personal harness.
This is enemy territory at the time of a war. What might he have been doing?
Right from the beginning of the war, he has been trying to detach people from loyalty to one side and bring them across to his side.
This was a dangerous and daring tactic. It seems that Edward I may well have been risking his own life to try and negotiate with the Scots. It'd be a bit like Barack Obama personally talking to the Taliban in Afghanistan. The badge that Fraser found is the only physical evidence in existence that strongly suggests King Edward I may have risked his life to enter enemy territory and talk to the Scots. Unfortunately, the war continued, even after his death. What does it mean to you as a medieval historian to actually be able to see, maybe even hold something like this?
Getting something like that out of this particular period, out of a war where this is raging over a huge territory, and yet here is an object that one of the leading figures in that war dropped.
This is a truly amazing find. It really is one of the great discoveries of the last few years, and our finder, Fraser Richardson, is rightly proud.
It's quite something to find an object in a field that just might have belonged to a king, and if it did, what it tells us about Edward I's bravery. Fascinating, too, to find out why 3 lions became the national symbol.
Our next item also reveals the deep roots of much of modern-day life. Only this time, it's astrology, which, as Russell Grant reveals, played a key part in the life of this Roman emperor.
One day, over 2,000 years ago, a teenager went to have his horoscope read. He was told that he would become the most powerful leader the world had ever known. In 2011, husband and wife Peter and Elizabeth Andrews were walking on the Mendip Hills in Somerset when they found something very beautiful but very strange. A small figure made of bronze and perfectly preserved. One end depicted a goat, the other a fish's tail. I'm going to the Museum of Somerset to have a look. Oh, goodness. This is immaculate, isn't it?
It's fabulous.
Nothing's been broken?
No, nothing at all. It looks complete.
Look at the cloven
Yes, we've
feet.
got the cloven feet.
That's incredible.
We've got the scales on the fish part of the body. We've got the fur down his neck.
Now, I am one of those astrologers for whom the goat and fish combination is very familiar. Capricorn is the best sign you could possibly be if you want to rule and you want to be a politician, if you want to be a smooth operator. But of course, negative Capricorn could be an autocrat, a dictator as well. You've got to look at people perhaps like with strong Capricornian influences, Mao Zedong, Stalin, Richard Nixon, and perhaps the greatest of them all, the first emperor of Rome, Augustus. Augustus was the founder of the Roman Empire and its very first emperor. He ruled for almost 40 years from 31 BC to 14 AD. Single-handedly, he transformed Rome from a republic into a de facto dictatorship, and his belief in his horoscope played an important role in his achievements.
The sign of Capricorn, he puts it on his coins, he puts it on jewellery that's commissioned to commemorate his reign, and from his use of it, the sign travels out through Roman art. Other people put it on their houses, on their tombs as an auspicious symbol. So it has that imperial connection.
But there was just one slight problem. Augustus was not a Capricorn at all. His actual sun sign was Libra, known to epitomize balance, harmony, and a sense of fair play. These qualities were not exactly in keeping with being a ruthless Roman emperor. So Augustus had done what every dictator could do. He simply swapped signs. But how did our figurine end up in Britain? Enthusiast and expert Dave Richardson, who loves wearing a toga almost as much as the Romans, thinks he has the answer.
Every legion formed or reformed by the Emperor Augustus has somewhere in its iconography a Capricorn. And you'll find as an emblem on the second Augustus shields, we find a Capricorn emblazoned on it.
What about then the Capricorn here? Would that have been something that the ordinary Roman soldier would have looked up at and seen as a good luck symbol?
With its connection to Augustus himself, yes. These emblems, these images, were revered to the point of them almost being a religious icon. The legion followed the standards to the very death.
And that's probably how our Capricorn figurine got here. It is a star exhibit at the Museum of Somerset, who raised the £16,000 needed to acquire it. It's not surprising that our lovely Capricorn has survived, because it would have been greatly cherished. So, next time you read your horoscope in the paper and hope for good news, remember that your Roman ancestors were doing exactly the same thing over 2,000 years ago. The only difference is that you don't get to choose your own sun sign.
Welcome back to Britain's Secret Treasures. This is the Fishpool Hoard, currently on display here at the British Museum. It's a spectacular set of medieval treasure with a curious link to our next story.
Historian Susanna Lipscomb investigates. This is Rolleston, Nottinghamshire. "5 years ago, in these fields, Darren Hoyle found an unexpected and beautiful treasure."
What did you think when you saw it? Did you know what it was?
I didn't at all. I'd never seen anything like it, to be honest. Just saw a glint of gold, and I'd never found gold before, and it was just amazing.
What did it look like?
It's a small square oblong, slightly smaller than a new 5p piece. Once I rubbed the dirt off it and had a look, I didn't really know what it was.
What Darren had found was a small gold locket with some intriguing writing on it. I want to see it for myself, so I'm going to the British Museum, who acquired it for £4,000.
This is the locket that was found in Rolleston.
Isn't it beautiful? It's so delicate.
It's very tiny, yes, it's very beautiful.
And exactly how would this have been worn?
It would have been suspended on a chain, much as we would wear a locket on a chain today. It is inscribed on both sides in French with the inscription sans repentir, without regret or without repentance.
The experts dated this unusual locket to the 15th century and the time of the War of the Roses, but at first it was a bit of a mystery. That was until it was compared to an older find, the so-called Fishpool Hoard, discovered 50 years before. The Fishpool Hoard is one of the greatest treasure finds ever made in Britain, and it was discovered just round the corner from Rolleston by workmen on a building site. Consisting of 1,237 gold coins, 4 gold rings and 2 lengths of gold chain, which in today's money would be worth over £300,000. It also contained a single gold locket.
This is from the Fishpool Hoard, and it's the same form but slightly larger, and it still has its key attached. And it also has a French inscription on both sides, which reads "De tout mon cœur," with all my heart or of all my heart.
How wonderful, it's so romantic.
Could these 2 lockets, found in different places, have once belonged to the same lovers? The great thing about the Fishpool Hoard is that the dates on the coins mean we know almost exactly when it was buried. And it's these dates that may hold the answer.
We think it was buried early in the year 1464, either before or after the Battle of Hexham, which was part of the Wars of the Roses, and it's thought to possibly belong to a member of the Lancastrian faction.
Lockets like these were one way of keeping a forbidden love affair secret.
Is there any scenario in which these two might be tokens of love that were exchanged?
There are inventories and wills which show that people bequeathed or gave them as gifts to their husbands and wives. It is intriguing that they were found so close together and they're the only two that survive.
These are the only two that we have in this country?
Yes.
We can't be sure that they come from two lovers, but they were found 10 miles apart. They look so similar, perhaps worked by the same goldsmith. And then, of course, there are those romantic messages. Perhaps they make up one sentence. With all my heart, without regret.
It just goes to show that despite everything else that changes through the ages, the power of love remains a constant thing.
Until relatively recently, childbirth was incredibly risky. And if you became pregnant, then you diced with death. Our next item reveals one family's heartbreaking story.
In 2005, in Bridgnorth, Shropshire, local enthusiast Tony Baker uncovered a very beautiful and mysterious ring.
What made you decide to come and look around here?
Well, I was actually living and working in the area. And Albury is also mentioned in the Domesday Book. There's history in the fields.
It's a tiny thing, though, a ring, so how hard was it to find?
Gold, it doesn't tarnish or anything, so as soon as it came out of the ground covered in dirt, I knew it was gold. When I got home and cleaned it up, it was really quite special.
Tony could then read the letters around the band. Mary and Sarah Littleton. OB died 7th of June, 1735. Two names on a ring is unusual, unless they're husband and wife. Tony was intrigued and decided to try to find out who Sarah and Mary Littleton might be.
I went on the internet, as most people do, and came across a marriage of a Mary Phillips and a Thomas Littleton, married in 1731. And from that, I found out that the church behind us, he was actually rector there for 50 years.
But what about Sarah?
Well, that was the next step in the research, to try and find out exactly what had happened and why the ring was made.
Tony then spent weeks searching through the church records for June 1735 to see if he could find any mention of the name Sarah Littleton. And eventually, he found the names of both Mary and Sarah in the births and deaths register.
This is a copy from the church records, dated 1735, and then down here we've got the entries confirming the death of his wife and daughter, and it reads, Sarah, the daughter of Thomas Littleton Clark, and Mary, his wife, baptised the 7th of June, and then underneath, Mary, his wife, and Sarah, his daughter, of Thomas Littleton Clark, buried the 8th of June, 1735.
So Mary's died in childbirth, and this little baby, Sarah, hasn't made it either. No. Terrible.
In 24 hours, he lost his wife and his daughter.
In the 18th century, 1 in 5 women died in childbirth, and over 12% of all newborns would die within the year. At this time, male doctors weren't allowed to attend. Midwives and friends helped to deliver babies. There were no anaesthetics available. It all took place at home, and if there were complications at birth, there was very little that could be done. Tragedies were common.
When you see it in writing like that, it's very tragic, it really is.
I mean, so these are the records from Thomas's own church, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. He's down as minister down there. I'm just wondering whether he'd actually done the entry of his own wife and daughter, which would be quite moving if he did.
This little ring was made so that Thomas's wife and his day-old daughter would never be forgotten.
Today, we have wedding rings to commemorate the day we exchange marriage vows. But from the Middle Ages, it was also customary for relatives to remember the day someone had died by wearing a mourning ring inscribed with the name and date of death.
By finding it, Tony's shed light on a heart-rending tradition. And also, in fact, 300 years on, he's also ensured that Mary and little Sarah will always be remembered.
Imagine you're walking by a lake or round some boggy ground, and you glance down, and in all that mud and murk, you suddenly see the glint of gold.
In the far west of Ulster, the land is watery and wild. Its bogs and rivers recall the legendary heroes of ancient Ireland. And here in Corrard, County Fermanagh, only a short while ago was discovered the most spectacular single piece of treasure ever found in Northern Ireland. So spectacular that the finder wishes to remain anonymous. For the man who found it, it seemed like no big deal. A twisted pile of metal. Perhaps it was an old car spring or something. But just to be sure, he contacted Ulster Museum, and they thought differently. When he sent them photographs, they were sure. This was a major find, and they wanted it.
It is quite simply the most important single item of prehistoric gold jewellery that has ever been found in Northern Ireland.
And I've got it.
And you've got
It's
it
mine.
at the moment.
It's incredible. It's so beautiful. It's called the Corrard Torque, made of nearly 2 pounds of solid gold. It's worth £20,000 just as bullion, but as an antiquity, it's priceless.
The word torque is derived from the Latin to twist. So the twist refers to this beautiful ribbon-like pattern. It originally formed a large circular hoop, and at either end we have 2 interlocking clasps. So these acted like the clasp, yeah, the clasp and necklace or the buckle in a belt. So we're presuming that it was maybe worn around the neck or waist.
And this was a really significant piece. I mean, this wasn't just anyone who owned this. This was someone who was really important and possibly the chief.
Yeah. When we think of the amount of gold involved in making an object like this obviously belonged to some kind of leader, whether it was a chief, whether it was a woman. Of course, we never can be certain. But, you know, it is really a stunning item of jewellery.
The torque is 3,000 years old, and it's been deliberately twisted out of shape before burial. When it was made, Ireland was the gold capital of Western Europe, a patchwork of small chiefdoms with a strong tradition of ornate metalwork, as our torque demonstrates. The design of the torque is made by carefully twisting a bar of gold, which has 4 corners or flanges in a cross shape. Even today, using brass and modern equipment, it's a tricky business. So you're twisting the gold here. I'm kind of terrified it's going to break.
Me too. It'll get to a point where it's too work hardened and it'll crack.
What's going on here is more than just metalwork. This is about transformation from one state to another. It's about magic. And in the Bronze Age, kingship was all about magic. Spirits kept you on the throne, and the spirits that kept this king safe would be right here, in his torque. Once the rod is fully twisted, it's finished by bending it into a shape I can wear. This torque feels amazing. It's so heavy, it's so beautiful. And that was what life was like for the average Bronze Age king. He's covered in gold, and he's covered in magical powers. But when the Corrard torque was found, it was unwearable. It had been bent completely out of shape. And like all torques of this kind, it wasn't buried with a body. Experts believe it was deliberately deposited in the bog.
One idea is it was like an offering to the gods. It was to bring good luck, ward off evil.
It's clearly been coiled, but why would someone do that?
It was actually even more compressed than it is now. And it's almost as if this was sending across a message. This object was no longer to be worn. It was decommissioned. It is almost as if it was just passing from one world to the next. It now could no longer be worn, and to sacrifice that amount of gold in the bog, it must have meant something.
Having been put beyond use, the torque stayed hidden for 3,000 years, until our finder discovered it and the museum acquired it under the Treasure Act.
It won't be long before that gorgeous talk takes pride of place here in the Bronze Age Gallery of the Ulster Museum. Now, our next find fast forwards us to the first Elizabethan age and to the 1500s, when Spain was our mortal enemy.
Businessman Frank Madden has been diving the stormy waters off Northern Ireland for 30 years. But on this occasion, he struck gold, literally.
To find something of this quality was truly amazing. It was stunning, fantastic.
Frank lives on the Antrim coast. It's a harsh and stormy shore where several ships of the Spanish Armada went down in 1588. The Armada was an enormous Spanish invasion fleet which attacked Queen Elizabeth's England. Defeated in the Channel, the Spanish ships sailed right round Britain to escape. And then a mighty storm wrecked up to 25 of them on the Irish coast. One of them was called the Girona. It was excavated professionally in the 1960s, but the archaeologists always knew that there was more to find.
The bottom is like the bottom of a quarry. There's nothing but stones. Now and again you find the odd cannonball or musket ball, but there's absolutely nothing that is visible that you could call a wreck. I was swimming along the wall and I noticed in the distance this really big lobster. And it was big, it caught my eye, and I thought, I'm going to swim over here and have a look at it. And just as I was swimming up to the lobster, I noticed something shining between its claws. And again, I thought, okay, looks nice. And I went down and there was this gold medallion or gold cameo. And I put my hands right between the lobster's claws and lifted the cameo up. And I looked at it and I thought, this is amazing. This is absolutely wonderful.
Frank had found a missing piece from a luxurious jewelled chain from the Girona, one that the archaeologists had missed. And this was part of their finery.
If you look at history, Roman emperors were powerful, and whoever owned that chain on board ship was obviously pretty powerful as well. You've just got to look at the materials in the cameo. You know, you have the lapis lazuli in the center, Afghanistan. When the Spaniards went to Mexico and Peru, they got enormous quantities of gold and silver.
Frank's now the licensed diver for the Girona wreck. It's his job to help protect it.
I thought maybe the cameo was valued at about a couple of £1,000. I decided that I would go into Sotheby's, and they were exceptionally excited about it because they couldn't believe the condition that was in it. They valued it at between £55,000 and £65,000. To me, it was priceless, and it is priceless because it's unique and there'll never be anything like it again. So it went to the right place among the rest of the stuff in the museum.
Now, our next item is just brilliant because it reveals not just the sights, but the sounds of our prehistoric past. Kevin Waitley investigates.
Eons ago, during my misspent youth, pre-Lewis, before Morse, before Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, I was a folk singer. And in the summer of 1969, a pal and I hitched through Northern Ireland here on our way over the border. And we got a residency singing in a pub in Donegal. So I've always loved Irish folk music. And when I heard that they'd found some instruments here that were almost 3,000 years old, I thought, well, this I've got to see, or rather, this I've got to hear.
The instruments I've come to see are ancient horns. They're made of bronze, and they're 3,000 years old. And centuries in a peat bog have protected them from corrosion.
These are absolutely perfectly preserved, aren't they, Craig?
These are 2 of 4 Bronze Age horns that were found in a bog in Drumbest in County Antrim. These are in perfect condition. So that means if we wanted to try to recreate an authentic Bronze Age sound, then these are the best examples.
Yeah. And presumably they'd have had some percussion as well for ceremonials, would they?
One of the most strange and enigmatic objects of the Bronze Age have been found with horns elsewhere. And this is it, and it's called a crottle. So if I just hand it to you and you give it a shake, we'll see what happens.
Oh, wow.
And there is a theory that the horns themselves were modelled on the horns of a bull.
Right.
And perhaps then, with not too much imagination, that might be the other end. Yeah. So who said in the Bronze Age that size doesn't matter?
Right.
These horns were found by a farm labourer back in 1840. And ever since, there have been arguments about how to play them and what sort of music they made.
Apparently one poor soul actually had a heart attack while he was trying to get some sound out of them. But there are a couple who reckon that they've cracked it. So I'm on my way to meet them at Ballymoney, quite near where the horns were found.
In the museum, there's another horn from the same find, and this cauldron here, which led experts to think that the horns were played during feasting ceremonies. Simon and Maria O'Dwyer here have some exact replicas of the horns, which they can actually play. And so at last, 3,000 years after they were made, from deep in the Irish past, I'm about to hear the music of our Bronze Age ancestors.
Very striking, isn't it? Makes your hair stand on end.
Lovely, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Who knows what spirits we are evoking now?
What about this one, Tom?
You might think that that's a very simple, primitive design.
Yeah.
But in fact, the nature of that mouthpiece and the fact that it's so large allows you to do a whole variety of things. As an example, you can use rhythmic techniques similar to those used in Aboriginal Australian didgeridoo playing. Here we go.
Amazing. Could we hear the two together?
This is what Bronze Age music sounded like, but I'm sure it would sound better in the open air. Out in the place where they were found, Drumbest, which the archaeologists think was a ceremonial area, a sacred landscape, perhaps a tribal homeland. There were stories of mythical beasts in this bog right up until the 18th century. Perhaps people were remembering the ceremonies of those ancient Irish people.
You know, this is fantastic. Often with folk music, you're reaching back into the past to bring a 200- or 300-year-old song through to the future. But to try and recreate something that's 3,000 years old, it's really exhilarating.
Coming up, a tiny treasure that revolutionised our understanding of Ireland's place in the world.
Would have felt a lot better if I had realised what it was at the time.
Hello, welcome back to Britain's Secret Treasures. This week, Bettany is in Northern Ireland, looking at the treasures that you've submitted to the Ulster Museum. Our next item, a tiny object packed with mysterious power.
The story begins on the banks of the Blackwater River, which divides County Armagh from Tyrone. Problems with flooding meant that the river had to be dredged. The rich mud recovered from the river was spread across the neighbouring fields. And then, Eamon McCurry and his friend James Walsh turned up. Eamon tells us what happened next.
It was a beautiful sunny day and the two lads were messing around at home, so I threw the both of them into the car along with the football. We came up here and had a bit of a kick around, and while they were kicking around, I was keeping my eye on the ground, and I came on this strange piece of decorated metalwork, and it obviously was very old. And in a very short time I'd come on a second piece of decorated metalwork. The two pieces were not identically the same shape, but had the same very intrinsic decoration on them.
What did it feel like when you were actually pulling it out of the earth?
Well, it felt pretty good, but it would have felt a lot better if I had realised actually what it was at the time.
Not long afterwards, in an organised search of the field, more fragments of metal were found, and the archaeologists were able to work out exactly what it was that Eamon and his friends had discovered.
This is it. It's called the Clonmore Shrine. and it's the oldest piece of Christian metalwork ever to be found in Ireland. Now, it's designed to look like a late Roman tomb, but in fact, it's what's known as a reliquary, a place where holy relics were stored. The workmanship on it is just superb, and that's no surprise, because what this once contained was thought to work miracles.
The decoration on the shrine holds hidden messages. It looks very old, Iron Age perhaps, but it matches the decoration found on the magnificent Bible known as the Book of Durrow. That gives it a date of from 650 to 700 AD. Originally, it would have glittered with light as the tin and bronze surface imitated gold and silver. Blue glass windows offered a glimpse of what lay within, perhaps a bone of a saint or a piece of their clothing. And it probably came from Armagh, where St. Patrick, who first brought Christianity to Ireland, set up his church. Armagh is still the ecclesiastical capital of Ireland, with not one, but two cathedrals, St. Patrick's Roman Catholic and St. Patrick's Church of Ireland. Medieval texts tell us that already in the 700s the settlement was filled with relics, so it felt really special to bring this replica back home.
The recovery of a treasure like this is miraculous enough as it is, but this is especially significant because it sheds light on a neglected chapter of Irish history. Just listen to this. The only other shrine anywhere in the world that matches this one was found not in Ireland, but 1,300 miles away in northern Italy.
That shrine is kept at a monastery in Italy, which was actually founded by a saint from Ireland, and the piece may well have been made by the same Armagh craftsman. Irish monks travelled far and wide, to Byzantium, to Egypt and the Middle East. The Book of Durrow, the very text which helped date the Clonmore Shrine, shows evidence of this contact and dialogue between East and West.
We find that in the great Gospel books, there are carpet pages, pages that look like Persian rugs. The Clonmore Shrine even has little panels of ornament on either end, which have sometimes been described as like carpets in themselves. That very sort of house-shaped shrine, the house of the dead, the tombs of the ancient martyrs of the Near East.
Even Ireland's iconic Celtic cross has Eastern connections.
The designs that you get in some of those carpet pages might feature crosses, including one that becomes to be thought of as Celtic, with the cross with a circle, a ring head behind it, like the great halo. And these, again, are stimulated by developments in Coptic and Eastern art that get absorbed and become part of the local Celtic repertoire.
So the little bits of metal Eamon and his colleagues discovered at Clonmore just a few years ago have helped change our view not just of Irish, but European history, of a time when Ireland was a beacon for Christian Europe. And yet, whether it was mislaid during a holy procession or cast away during a Viking attack, or lost when the abbot of Armagh fell in the river in 1118, somehow it ended up at the bottom of the River Blackwater.
No one knows for sure why the Clonmore Shrine ended up here in the river, but what is certain is that it's a clue to the truth of what we once called the Dark Ages. Back then, Ireland wasn't just a rain-swept outpost at the edge of the known world. It was a key part of a Christian network that spanned 3 continents, Europe, Asia and Africa. And because of that, whatever its power as a holy object, as a piece of historical evidence, the Clonmore Shrine still has real power today.
Finding a treasure is an extraordinary experience in itself, but it's just the start of the story. Once it comes here to the British Museum, it's up to a team of experts to try to find out what it is and who it might have belonged to. Our next item is a real detective story, and we sent the historian Susanna Lipscomb to investigate.
Think of Essex. What do you think of? Well, maybe lots of things, but certainly gated driveways, beautiful scenery, and bling.
And this next treasure is certainly that. 5 years ago, here in a field in Brentwood, Essex, carpenter George Sparks was amazed when he found something glittering in the earth.
First of all, I thought, oh, it's just a piece of costume jewellery. You know, I could see it was like goldy colour and some stones in, but with it covered in mud, you couldn't really tell. I put it in my little bag. When I got back to my van, there was a puddle there, so I thought I'd dip it in there and wash it off with an old toothbrush, and then I could see the setting of the stones, and that made me realise that it could be something, you know, a little bit special.
George knew it had to be significant and took it to the local finds liaison officer. It certainly wasn't costume jewellery, but a beautifully crafted gold pendant, set with diamonds, a single red ruby and coloured enamel on the back. Not only was this the real deal, but it is 400 years old. So who did this treasure belong to?
What we know about this pendant is that it comes from the late 16th century, so Elizabethan England.
Portraits of the day show us that wealthy Elizabethan women were obsessed with high fashion and covered almost anything they could find in jewels, tiaras, necklaces, rings, garters, brooches and earrings. And this pendant is one such piece of jewellery. I've come to Colchester Museum, where the curator Philip Wise has got the actual pendant to show me.
This is a really spectacular object because a lot of time and effort was devoted to making it.
Gosh, that's beautiful, isn't it? Look at those diamonds, they're very big.
It's a stunning object. It would have belonged to a lady of great fashion, certainly somebody who was living at court and wanted to show off her wealth and importance.
The most fashionable woman of the day, of course, was Queen Elizabeth I, daughter of Henry VIII and successful ruler of England for 45 years.
So, did our pendant really belong to Elizabeth I? Perhaps the answer lies in where it was found.
The pendant was discovered in the grounds of local manor house, Ingatstone Hall, which has been in the Peter family since Queen Elizabeth was on the throne. But what would she have been doing here? The latest Lord Peter has some interesting documents.
We know she came to Essex. Do we know that she actually came here?
Yes, Queen Elizabeth I came here as part of her first royal progress, which were a series of trips she made every year to visit outlying parts of her kingdom.
What sort of proof do we have?
The only documentary evidence we've got is this extract from an account book of the time, which is the record of the provisions that they had to buy specially for God knows how many people.
And it's quite something, isn't it? We've got 18 herons.
Yes, an amazing range of all sorts of birds which we wouldn't dream of eating these days.
So we know that she was here. I mean, is there any possible opportunity or moment at which she could have lost this pendant?
It was in a sort of pretty remote part of the farm, so why she would have been walking there is a bit of a mystery, but nevertheless, anything is possible.
We can't say for certain that this pendant belonged to Elizabeth I. But what we can say is it's of sufficient quality to have belonged to her, it's from the right era, and we know that she came here. So it is a possibility.
Now, from the Elizabethan age to the Iron Age, this gorgeous golden torque is one of the most fabulous objects to have survived from Iron Age Britain. And it's a clue that appearances have mattered right across the centuries. But our next item also suggests that vanity was in play even in prehistory. Mary Anna Cotter investigates.
In 2007, here in Pegston, near the Chiltern Hills in Bedfordshire, an anonymous finder unearthed a flat piece of metal with a handle. Cleaning away the mud, he saw that one side was elaborately engraved and the other side was plain. It was taken to the local finds officer, who confirmed that the metal was bronze and the decoration was a good example of Celtic art. This dated the treasure to the 1st century BC, which makes it well over 2,000 years old. I've come to meet archaeologist Gil Burley, who has a replica of the object.
So, Gil, tell me about this beautiful object.
Well, it's a mirror, in fact.
That's extraordinary.
A mirror from the Iron Age, a rare high-status object.
It's absolutely exquisite. I imagine in the Iron Age, that's actually quite rare to see what you look like.
It is, because people would only see their reflection, normally speaking, in water.
If our Iron Age ancestors were looking at themselves in a mirror, what did they see? Accounts from the time say that both men and women had long, sometimes plaited hair and coloured makeup on their faces. They wore elaborate gold and bronze jewellery and clothes made from animal skins, wool and linen. But other discoveries reveal even more. There's evidence from preserved 2,000-year-old bog bodies that Iron Age men were very into grooming. The Lindau man dug up in northwest England was found to have manicured fingernails, and he clearly used small shears to trim his beard and moustache.
So our mirror weighs 370 grams, which is equivalent to about 39 £1 coins, which is quite heavy for a handheld mirror. I definitely think it was used for some other purpose.
Archaeologists returned to the find spot and discovered that it was a late Iron Age burial site, where they also found a silver brooch, pottery shards, and some human bone.
Do you think Iron Age mirrors are just about vanity, or is there something else going on here?
Because it was found in a cremation burial, we think that maybe it was used not just for personal grooming, but in religious ceremonies as well, that involved the power and potency of the mirror in reflecting light, magical implications, the power of the sun.
You can really see how much it catches the light and reflects this kind of incredible golden glow.
We think that possibly the mirror reflects a link between the present life and the afterlife.
Little is known about religion in the Iron Age. It's thought that people worshipped nature and the elements, the wind, the rain, the sun, and Romans documented that rituals were performed by druids. Perhaps this mirror was used as a sacred, magical symbol, possibly during a funeral and then buried with its owner.
It's incredible to think that such a familiar object is over 2,000 years old, but we can't make the mistake of assuming that our Iron Age ancestors used and understood mirrors in the same way that we do today. This treasure will always keep some of its secrets.
Coming up, a stash of Roman wealth.
It was incredible. Thousands and thousands of coins coming out of the ground. It took me hours to dig them out.
And a little treasure with royal connections.
They would have been used for hunting birds, and, as you'd expect for a royal one, far, far superior.
Welcome back. We've been travelling all around the country, showcasing the treasures discovered by you, the British public. These are really remarkable finds that are rewriting the story of our past.
Every 3 months, the Treasure Valuation Committee meets here at the British Museum to value the most important objects that have been discovered by the public. Treasures worth millions in total have passed through their hands.
Our next find was valued by the committee at tens of thousands of pounds. John Prescott went to South Wales to investigate the story and discovered that politics has always been a dangerous game.
My journey starts with an extraordinary find. In 1998, treasure hunter Colin Roberts was searching a field near the M4 when he made one of the most significant finds in Welsh history, the first of over 3,800 Roman coins.
What did you think when you saw that first coin?
It was incredible. It was just all these, well, thousands and thousands of coins coming out of the ground. It took me hours to dig them out. I just couldn't believe it. I didn't realise what they were worth. They went to a valuation committee and they came to a figure of £40,000, which was lovely. But it's the finding of the object, not what it's worth.
The thousands of coins found by Colin included the heads of numerous emperors, but one in particular caught the eye of the curators. It displayed 3 heads, which makes it a unique find. I've come to the National Museum of Wales to find out what got the curators so excited. What is the significance of this hoard to you?
Well, the rocket hoard's an extraordinary hoard, actually. Just over 3,800 coins.
But I've got one with 3 heads on here.
It is exceptional and it's excessively rare, and this is a particularly fine specimen.
At the time this coin was minted, the Roman Empire was governed in tandem by 2 emperors, like a coalition today. Their heads can be seen on the right-hand side of the coin, Maximian and Diocletian. As emperors of the Roman world, they had every right to be on the coins of the empire. But this character on the far left of the coin shouldn't be there. His name is Carausius, and he was the Roman governor of Britain. But he had ideas above his station.
He starts referring to there being 3 emperors. And perhaps Carausius was trying to get himself recognised as a third legitimate ruler of part of the Roman Empire.
And we know from the history books that he was only able to make this bold move with the help of his finance minister, Alectus.
So we have this charismatic leader, and he has an ambitious finance minister.
Not Gordon Brown.
Well, it's funny you should say that.
It's the same thing. What's new?
Do you see any such parallels in the course of your career?
I certainly do. I spent a lot of political time between 2 characters in this, was Tony Blair and, of course, Gordon. The temptation to rule was too much for the finance minister Alectus. He stabbed Carausius to death. Carausius has been lost to history, but the coin he created is a lasting legacy. I've come to the Welsh National Assembly to talk to Jude England, who is a specialist on propaganda.
We started with the coin. That's mass media. It's your everyday item. It follows you home. Your coin in your pocket then translating into a radio that's in every home. Then you have film, where you get people collectively coming together. And then you go from film into television, so you're then in the home again. And now we've moved into the sort of social media environment with the internet, which is again having a big influence.
It seems extraordinary that our tiny Roman coin has grown into Facebook, Google and Twitter. The birth, really, of internet, of social network, of propaganda, of image, of modern-day politics came from this. Amazing.
From political animals to creatures of the natural world, man's always been a hunter, and here at the British Museum there are extraordinary collections of hunting weapons for survival and later for sport. Our next object gives us a glimpse into how our royal ancestors might have hunted.
Just last year, here in Clay-next-the-Sea, North Norfolk, an anonymous finder spied a flash of silver glinting in the ground. He handed it in to the local fines liaison officer, who was able to piece together the details. A name, Prince Henry, and 3 ostrich feathers sitting above a crown. This was the royal emblem of the Prince of Wales, still in use today. This, together with the name Henry, almost certainly meant it could only belong to one man. Henry Stuart, Prince of Wales, the eldest son and heir of King James I and VI of England and Scotland, born in 1594.
Now, we're told that Henry was tall and athletic, cultured and charismatic, and that his accession to the throne was eagerly anticipated.
So this treasure is a royal treasure. But what actually is it, and what's its significance? I'm here at Norwich Castle, where it's now kept.
This would have been used for hunting birds. Hawking has always been an aristocratic pastime, and in the late 16th and 17th centuries, often they would attach to their hunting birds, their hawks, vervels, which were these little rings. They were an ownership mark to be able to say, this belongs to me. If it gets lost, return it to me, please.
Kind of like we do when we put a tag around our cat's collar or something.
Exactly. So you can see there's a variety of them. A lot of them are just like washers, just basic plain rings. And this is, as you'd expect for a royal one, far, far superior.
Henry loved riding and hunting and had a passion for hawking. This silver tag, known as a verval, must have been attached to one of his birds when it was lost. He's so beautiful. What kind of falcon is this?
This is Sparky. He's a peregrine falcon, and this is the sort of bird that Prince Henry would have had.
Now, I've got a little treat for you. So this is a replica of Prince Henry's Verval.
Oh, that's rather stunning, that. Absolutely beautiful. I suspect this was sewn in just to the end of the Jessie there, so he could put a leash through it. When he was out hunting, he could throw the bird quickly from his fist. It is absolutely gorgeous, has to be said.
Prince Henry was first in line to the throne, a young man with his whole life ahead of him. But tragedy struck just a few months before his 19th birthday. On the 6th of November, 1612, Henry died. Thousands lined the streets weeping as his body was taken to Westminster Abbey. There was now a new heir to the throne, Henry's younger brother Charles. But Charles was nowhere near as popular as Henry. He was seen as physically weak, awkward. In 1625, when King James died, Charles was crowned king.
Charles I's reign was dramatic and disastrous for the monarchy and would change Britain forever.
When Charles became king, his overpowering rule infuriated Parliament and the people, triggering the bloody English Civil War. Those in Parliament devised a cunning plan to have King Charles arrested on behalf of the people. He was then beheaded. For the first time in centuries, there was no monarch ruling the nation. And all of this may never have happened had Prince Henry not died.
The discovery of that Verval has just made me feel so connected to Henry, the forgotten prince, and to the falconry that he loved. And just think about this. If that falcon hunt had finished a day later or a day earlier, then Henry would have ended up in a different place at a different time. And maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have contracted typhoid. In which case, we'd have had a Henry IX rather than a Charles I, and our country and all of our lives would have been completely different.
Well, you could only dream about finding a hoard of coins like this one at the British Museum. But if you ever do, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, as our next finder discovered.
Holy Island in Northumberland, also known as Lindisfarne, a gorgeous island off the coast of northeast England.
It was on Holy Island that two amazing discoveries were made that show us that the way our Elizabethan ancestors managed their money had more in common with us than you might think. Incredibly, they were found on exactly the same spot, but decades apart.
In 1963, builder Alan Short found a pot of fairly ordinary Elizabethan coins under a house in Lindisfarne. But experts didn't think much of them until 2003, when another builder, Richard Mason, was renovating the same house with his dad and made a discovery that was far more intriguing.
I was hand digging under a pipe and heard a clunk, and I thought, it's strange. So I dug around it and exposed a little jug. Pulled the jug out. It was covered in mud and clots. I had a quick look inside. It appeared empty. I chucked it in the back of our van and thought nothing more of it.
The pot was left in Richard's father's basement for nearly 8 years before anyone finally looked inside.
Just before Christmas, on a really wet day, I was cleaning the jug out and tipped it upside down, and out fell the coins.
That must have been extraordinary. Suddenly you've got this pile of gold and silver.
It certainly was, aye. It was it's just once in a lifetime it happens.
Did you mark the moment in any way?
Yes, I washed the jug out and I filled it up with beer, and I drank a toast to a chap that buried the coins.
Now housed temporarily at the British Museum, Richard had unearthed a pottery jug containing 17 beautiful gold and silver coins from across Europe, thought to have been buried in the Elizabethan period. I'm meeting up with coin expert Richard Kelleher to find out more.
So Richard, what was found?
Well, it's a fascinating and very important find. There's 17 coins. The earliest is this medieval group. A couple of gold angels. Those are the gold coin of English currency at this time.
These are all valuable, well-known coins from the Elizabethan age. But amazingly, there is one coin here that is the origin of the most powerful currency in the world today.
What's this great big one at the end here?
Well, this is really interesting. This is a big, chunky silver thaler. This is a German coin. Indeed, it's where we get our name dollar today from. It's really interesting because we don't find these in England, in Britain at all. And this is the first that we know of.
Thalers were massive silver coins minted in Germany in the 1500s and eventually adopted by the early American colonies, where the English name for thaler was abridged to dollar. To have one in Elizabethan England would have made you a wealthy man. So what was it doing buried under a house in Lindisfarne? During the late 1500s, Elizabeth I sat on the throne, and the country faced a mounting economic crisis. The population had dramatically expanded, inflation was rife, wages were low, there was a series of terrible harvests leading to famine and outbreaks of plague. And after the dissolution of the monasteries, the streets were filled with a roaming army of beggars and vagabonds. And that is very probably why the person who lived at the house buried his coins, to protect them. But who was he, and why did he bury them separately?
What's the significance of these two hoards being found together?
Well, that's really interesting because we don't often find companion hoards in this country. I think what we can surmise is, look at the content. The early one from the 60s is full of kind of small change, the silver, denominations of everyday use. That's perhaps what you might have in your wallet or your purse, that kind of thing. And this other one, the new one, with the silver thaler, you know, this is a significant amount of money. And we'd look at it as a sort of a savings account. Or it was a merchant who lived there. It could have been the kind of money that he would be using in his high-level business. And the fact that the foreign coins are in there kind of leans me towards thinking that.
In today's economic climate, we can perhaps understand why, in Elizabethan England, someone would have a nest egg like that. What he intended to spend them on, why he never came back, we'll never know. But what we do know is that these are a true secret treasure.
It's great how someone's personal belongings can shed light on a key moment in British history.
When treasures are handed in by members of the public, they're sometimes brought down here to the basements within the museum for a team of experts to uncover the mysteries that they hold. Our next object from Derbyshire is very mysterious, as the style editor Echo Eschen discovered.
There's a fine art to male grooming. You have to moisturise, exfoliate, trim your nose hairs, trim your ear hairs. The list goes on and on. But this obsession with appearance and with health and hygiene isn't as modern as it seems. This funny little treasure was dug up by an anonymous finder in Derbyshire 9 years ago. I've never seen anything like it. It has a sharp hook at one end, and at the other, what looks like a dragon with something in its mouth. I'm told it's for male grooming. I can't imagine what it's used for. I've come to Derby Museum to see it for myself.
So tell me, what exactly do you use this for?
Well, it's got two uses. It's a dual-purpose tool. So one end, the end with a little spoon on, is for cleaning the wax out of your ears, and the other pointed end is for cleaning the food out from between your teeth. It's a silver toothpick ear scoop.
So the ear scoop would go like that, and then you use that just to pick between your teeth.
Yeah, that's right. It dates to the late 16th and early 17th century.
For noblemen during Elizabethan times, bathing was a novelty rather than a daily exercise, yet cleanliness was highly prized. From tongue scrapers to knit and grease combs, there were a vast array of grooming products to help keep you looking good.
It's the sort of thing that a good gentleman would have about his person. It's a sort of I am clean badge.
But whilst the metrosexual of today has an array of soothing and scented lotions and creams to choose from that say, I am clean, the other options for our Elizabethan ancestors were to be endured, not enjoyed.
So basically, this is a 17th century beauty parlour. We've got all sorts of things. What's that? Goose fat, all sorts of herbs and spices. What's going on here?
Well, here we've got a sort of little microcosm of an early modern pharmacy, because what people used was often growing around them.
How do people look after their teeth?
Teeth can be looked after in a number of ways. You might rub a sage leaf over them very vigorously to pick up little deposits and freshen your breath up a little bit. You might clean them with a linen cloth in the same way, rub them back and forth, or you might chew twigs, which is another way of strengthening the teeth and sort of carrying away little bad deposits.
So they take some sage like this and brush it like that and... How's that?
You smell like stuffing breath.
From Sunday lunch. It does have that Sunday lunch ambience too. It does.
So that's my teeth sorted. But there was one issue of appearance that obsessed Elizabethan men back then as much as it does blokes today. Baldness. Rich or poor, a man losing his hair would try a variety of different remedies. For peasants, the classic treatment was to rub chicken droppings into one's scalp. But for noblemen, it was this.
Take some ivy, boil it in water to get the juice, then add it to some honey, and then, to use the 17th century language, anoint the bald place therewith.
I love this little toothpick. Whoever it belonged to must have been gutted when they lost it. But thanks to our Derbyshire finder, I can just imagine its 16th century dandy owner producing it with a flourish at a dinner party, scooping his ears and picking his teeth while the other guests looked on in admiration.
It may not be worth much, but it's an intimate and fascinating object, and it's a reminder that for centuries, male grooming has been about more than just mere vanity.
Coming up.
Oh my goodness.
Mariella Frostrup unearths the truly horrific story behind a mysterious badge.
I really wouldn't want to be locked in here overnight on my own.
And a strange artefact turns up on the Isle of Wight.
But actually, what is it? What would it actually been used for?
Hello, welcome back to Britain's Secret Treasures.
Now, our next item is really lovely, but little did its finder realise he'd unearthed a clue to one of the most horrific massacres of the medieval age.
Mariella Frostrup investigates.
While walking in fields outside Preston, Paul King, who works in logistics for a supermarket, came across a strange-looking piece of metal sticking out of the ground.
When I knocked the soil away from it, straight away this face came out of the soil, and it was in such good condition that I thought, this is a really super-duper find.
Paul had no idea what or who he had found. Lloyd de Beer from the British Museum joined me at the Museum of Lancashire, where the badge is on display. So what do we have here, Lloyd?
What we have here is very unusual, it's very rare. It's made out of silver, and it represents a virgin saint called St. Ursula. And she's renowned for her beauty and her grace, her virtue and her piety.
But this isn't all she was famous for. The fate of St. Ursula is one of the most disturbing tales in our history. Ursula lived in Britain in 500 AD. She was a devout Christian at a time when Christianity existed uneasily alongside paganism. According to legend, her father, the local king, wanted her to marry a neighboring pagan prince to make an alliance. She agreed, but only on two unusual conditions.
One of the conditions is that her future husband must become a Christian, must be baptized in the faith. And the second part is that she has to undertake a holy pilgrimage, and she must be accompanied by 10 other virgins, and them to be accompanied by 1,000 other virgins each.
Amazing they could find that many in the country. Surprisingly, her father agreed, and the story goes that she and 11,000 virgins set off on a pilgrimage to Rome. But on their return trip, tragedy struck in Cologne, Germany. And according to the legend, they were all slaughtered in cold blood. Which is why I've come to the city to try and unravel the mystery of this fascinating little object. For years, this seemed like an incredible myth. But then, in the 1300s, builders working on a church in Cologne discovered something truly terrible. This is St. Ursula's Basilica, where our little badge, discovered in a muddy English field, started its life. Hi. Oh my goodness. This is amazing. What have we got in here? What's all that? That's not what I think it is.
It is exactly what you think it is.
These
bones are the human bones which they found when they were doing the foundation of this church.
When Ursula and her entourage of 11,000 virgins stopped off in Cologne on their way home, they attracted the attention of a savage tribe of pagan warriors known as the Hun. They believed that the new Christian faith was destroying their ways, so they executed Ursula and all of her followers. The builders of the church who found these remains decided to honor their memory in this chapel. Quite extraordinary what they've done with them. They've written with them.
Yeah, exactly. You see the words, a prayer, Santa Ursula pro nobis ora, pray for us.
That's one of the most macabre things I've ever seen in my life. And you know what? I've just realised it doesn't stop there. It goes all the way around that wall as well.
Everywhere. But they are not just only on the walls, they are inside of the busts or behind these glasses.
You mean the skulls inside the busts?
Yes, yes.
I really wouldn't want to be locked in here overnight on my own. But many people did want to spend time here, including the owner of our badge. For dying for her faith, Ursula was made a saint after her death, and in the following years, people from all over Europe flocked to the church. These badges, a bit like modern-day souvenirs, were sold to pilgrims so they could touch them on Ursula's shrine and take a little bit of her saintliness home with them. Somehow, it was lost, only to be found hundreds of years later by Paul King and remind us of this forgotten woman. Her sacrifice as a Christian was one of many, and just 50 years after the massacre, Britain was almost entirely Christian and paganism was dying out. Not only have I got to uncover the story of a sadly neglected saint, but also to follow in the footsteps of an early English pilgrim who braved the long and perilous journey to Ursula's shrine here in Cologne and returned with a much-treasured souvenir.
That badge is a great reminder that religious and spiritual belief can leave us with some wonderful physical objects. Pretty much like our next item, though I have to say, the fact that this one has survived is nothing short of miraculous.
The Isle of Wight is a place apart. It's a place of prisons, from Charles I, who was held here before his execution, to high-security jails now. But it's also a place where a thing of beauty can escape a time of turmoil.
In 2011, retired fireman Richard Armiger was hunting for treasure on the Isle of Wight when he made a curious discovery.
Did you bring it with you?
Yeah,
Oh, come on.
it is.
Ah.
I dug down about a foot, and that was facing upwards like that. Of course, it was the glint of gold, which is a real kick.
What was going through your mind at that stage?
I was very excited about it.
But what actually is it? I'm on my way to find somebody who knows. Hi, Naomi.
Hi, Michael.
Naomi Speakman is the British Museum's medieval curator.
What is it?
OK, well, this is a Limoges enamel. And that's a metal plaque. So the underside of this is copper. And it's been enamelled, which is basically like powdered glass. And it was made in Limoges, which is in central France.
What would it actually been used for?
If we turn it over, you can see it has this hole drilled in there. So it's very likely to have been a plaque attached to a larger altarpiece. So something decorative that would have been on an altar.
800 years ago, churches were the centre of life for the whole community. They were beautifully decorated and incredibly colourful. Coming all the way from France, this Limoges enamel would have been a stunning piece of decoration and a treasured possession for any English medieval church. So I'm intrigued as to why ours might have ended up buried in a field. I'm going to All Saints Church, just 15 miles from where the Limoges enamel was found, to meet Father John Ryder,
Good afternoon, Father. How are you?
Good afternoon, Michael. Welcome.
Thanks. It's good to meet you.
This stunning image would have decorated the wall at about the same time our enamel decorated a church, perhaps even this one. They are both rare survivors from the two greatest onslaughts that the Catholic Church has ever known. And the painting bears the scars.
But this is rather unusual, isn't it?
If you look closely, you will see sword marks in the lower areas.
Firstly, when King Henry VIII abolished the Catholic Church overnight, images like these were often painted over and objects like our enamel destroyed by his supporters. This was the Reformation. Then, 100 years later, following the defeat of King Charles I in the English Civil War, the Puritan Oliver Cromwell ordered the desecration of Catholic churches.
Somebody stood here and actually was so angry at it.
Yes.
The destruction was that intense.
Yes.
It changed the churches of England.
It made them look totally different, yes.
Our Limoges enamel would have been ripped out of a church and discarded during one of these violent attacks. But thanks to Richard Armiger, wandering along in a field, we have it again.
This enamel is a survivor, a rare relic from the time before Henry VIII and the religious revolutions that all but wiped out the decoration and trappings of previous ages. Revolutions that not only changed our churches, but changed England and changed what it meant to be English forever.
You can search your whole life and never find any treasure. But on his first trip, our next finder uncovered the greatest hoard of Scottish gold to be found in modern times. And then, just a few months later, he uncovered another stunning object. I wanted to meet the man with all the luck. For his birthday in 2007, animal handler David Booth bought himself a metal detector. On his very first outing, he got a bit of a surprise.
I drove down to the field, parked up the Jeep, and I thought just pick the direction to head off in. Got out of the car, walked about 7 paces. First ever signal I ever had. Decided to dig quite far around it. First thing came up was one of the ribbon torques. And then I dug all around it, and then the rest of the hoard came out as well, so it was just unbelievable.
It was gold, wasn't it? So presumably it must have started to glint pretty quickly.
It does, yeah, it just doesn't tarnish at all. It came out of the ground almost pristine and just looked absolutely perfect.
David had unearthed the greatest hoard of gold recently found in Scotland. 4 gorgeous torques, over 2,000 years old, symbols of great power and wealth that would have been worn by someone super important. But Treasure Trove gets so many emails about gold that at first, David's almost got overlooked. Deep in the bowels of the museum, I went to meet Stuart Campbell.
We do get a lot of emails simply entitled gold jewellery, and I'd almost dismissed it before I'd actually opened it, thinking another of those. I was quite surprised, and there was a bit of swearing in the office that morning as well.
David's find was valued by Scotland's Treasure Trove at £462,000, which David received in its entirety. Only he wasn't finished yet. He went on looking for treasure, and just a few months ago, lightning struck twice when he found something else.
Must have been lucky with the soil conditions in that field as well, because it came out pretty clean.
David's new find was called a seal matrix. It was about 900 years old, made of silver, and had an intriguing gemstone at its heart. When dipped in molten wax, it was used to form a seal on a document that gave it an individual signature, a bit like a PIN number. Do you think it might have been buried, or is this something that would have just dropped off its owner?
Losing something like this would be like losing a credit card, and there are cases in the Middle Ages of someone stealing someone else's seal matrix and effectively going on a shopping spree and signing up to all sorts of things. So losing it would be a very serious matter.
The most intriguing part of the matrix is the seal stone. It wasn't made in medieval times like the rest of the badge, but is actually Roman, depicting the goddess Juno. It tells us that Scotland at the time valued a kind of retro look. Here, our matrix owner has taken a piece of original Roman art and incorporated it into the fashions of the time.
So to have something like this, it really was to show that you were a cultured and learned person who carried and used this object.
The seal matrix wasn't worth nearly as much as the torques, but it was still valued at £6,000.
And I know it's like asking you to choose between your children, but do you have a favourite between either of these?
The seal for me is my favourite out of the two, because I had an idea what it was when I dug it up. I just love the detail on it.
And also, it's a medieval credit card. Maybe that's its allure as well.
Yeah, it could possibly be, yeah.
This is a stone from the Antonine Wall, which once cut Scotland in two, showing the Romans dominating the Scots, who were cowering under their weapons and their horses. It wasn't always that way, of course, or else they wouldn't have needed the wall. And that's what's interesting, I think, about the seal. The Scots embracing and reusing Roman style, even though the Romans never really properly got to grips with their country.
But our next treasure is a testament to the time 1,700 years later, when an invading force did get to grips with Scotland. Michael Buerk investigates.
When I was Secretary of State for Defence, responding to events in Bosnia, I saw how hard it is to mend the bitter hatreds of civil war and to reintegrate the vanquished with the victors.
Well, here's a place where that process occurred, 250 years ago, in the Highlands near Inverness. Gunsmith Eric Soanes found some fantastic little treasures in a field that reveal how the last Scottish rebels finally buried the hatchet and joined Britain.
When did you know you had something special?
Well, I could see they were lead soldiers, but at the time, when they're covered in dirt, you can't see all the detail that's come out on them there. It wasn't until I washed the dirt off when I got home. I could see that quite clearly that the uniform was from the 1700s, you know, rather than something modern.
The detail really is rather lovely.
It is, they're beautifully made.
What Eric had found were two toy soldiers, their uniforms so detailed that the experts were able to date them almost exactly. They're wearing British uniforms from the years following 1745, a crucial date in Scottish history. King George II reigns over the union of England and Scotland, but some Highlanders rejected King George. They rebelled, led by Bonnie Prince Charlie. The two opposing armies met at Culloden, and the British, known as Redcoats, destroyed the Scottish resistance. It was the last time anyone in Scotland went to war with the British state. Afterwards, the British decided to take control of the Highlands once and for all, so they built Fort George, where the toy soldiers were found.
The British made Fort George massive to dominate and intimidate the Highlands, spending the equivalent of £1 billion. It's still a British army base today, though few now would regard this as a force of occupation. Indeed, Scottish regiments have repeatedly fought patriotically and heroically for Britain. And our toy soldiers offer a clue as to how that situation came to be.
The years after Culloden were a difficult time for the Scottish Highlanders, forced as they were to share their country with the British soldiers of the fort. But inevitably, the lives of the locals became entwined with those of the soldiers. That had an effect.
Well, these were probably made by soldiers here at the fort from melted down lead bullets. The soldiers of the fort would get into relationships with the local people. It was a local community and people were in and out of the fort, so they could have been made for local children.
Contacts like this were crucial if the union was going to stick, as stick it did. And it's possible that Eric's toy soldiers played their part in forging a better relationship between the British and the people of the Highlands. Certainly relations improved dramatically, and last year the fields around the fort yielded a different artefact. This time to find a Jack Mackay that gives us a clue as to just how much.
Did you know what it was when you found it?
I didn't actually know, but found out now it's the only one in existence.
Well, that must make you very proud.
That's something, absolutely, absolutely. I was so chuffed when I heard that. It was just incredible.
Jack had found a belt buckle from a soldier's uniform. It dates to just 50 years after Culloden, when a unified Britain was at war with France and Napoleon. Around the edge was the name of a regiment, the Fort William Volunteers, and that's what makes it so special.
It was a time of the Napoleonic Wars and there was a shortage of men, so local gentry or local people would form their own volunteer regiments.
So these are Scottish volunteers ready to go off and do their patriotic duty for Britain.
Yeah, local people.
So, only 50 years after their defeat at Culloden, Scottish Highlanders were volunteering to serve in the British Army. This was an astounding turnaround. Scotland had finally bought into a united Britain, a union that has lasted to this day.
It's a new world now, as I gaze out upon a tranquil Scotland where in 2014 the people will vote on whether to maintain the Union. These objects illustrate a crucial stage in the long-running relationship between England and Scotland, and they also demonstrate how old enmity can melt away to be recast as friendly rivalry.
Hello, and welcome back to Britain's Secret Treasures. This week we've been in Scotland, looking at the treasures that you've submitted as treasure trove.
Now, our next item is a fantastic hoard of silver coins, but there's an enigma. How did it end up where it was found? Fraser Hunter, who's curator at the National Museum of Scotland and helped to excavate the hoard, has the story.
Hamish Stewart was metal detecting in a field in Bettany when he found something really unexpected.
As I moved further this way, I started to pick up a Roman coin or two. And once I had about 4 or 5, I knew I had a hoard somewhere. You got involved, and we started to strip the field.
The dig was the beginning of an amazing detective story, which I was part of.
We were working here late on with the tractor headlights at night to pick them up, and it was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
It was quite stunning getting the two so close together. It was just amazing.
Oh, it was amazing.
When we had finished, we had 2 hoards of Roman silver coins that dated to the late 2nd century AD. But something simply didn't add up. In the 2nd century AD, the people of Bettany didn't use coins. They bartered goods and animals. And the Romans had never settled this far north. So how did the coins get here? The answer lies in bribery and corruption. After years of battling with the locals, the Romans had cut their losses and built Hadrian's Wall. 80 miles long, it marked the boundary of their empire and was a potent symbol of their struggle to control the area. But while they may have given up their attempts at conquest, they certainly hadn't given up their political aims, and that's where the hoards come in. I think these coins came here straight from the Roman authorities. A bribe to encourage good behaviour. For the locals, the silver and other gifts were really important. Exotic objects they could use to show off with. It had a value for the Romans as well. This silver was a tool of control. To build some groups up, create haves and have-nots. To interfere and manipulate far beyond the frontier. And it's a strategy empires still use today. The silver bought an uneasy peace between the tribes of Scotland and the Romans, at least until the late 2nd century AD, when a new emperor, Septimius Severus, came to power. He decided to stop these bribes. When the silver stopped flowing, it caused chaos. These powerful folk had become dependent, almost addicted to it. Without Roman objects, they were nothing. Their world was in turmoil. Now for the Romans, this seemed like great news. These troublesome tribes wouldn't be bothering them anymore. But they were wrong. For out of the wreckage of these groups developed another, much more warlike enemy. The Picts. Creators of this amazing art, and one of the building blocks of modern Scotland. So these coins which Hamish found are much more than just games played by Roman politicians. They represent the beginnings of a new people in Scotland's history.
Finally tonight, all of our treasures have reflected changes in Scottish history and Scottish identity, but none more so than the next one. Our story starts on a remote mud bank in the River Tay, and I was there.
Scotland's great rivers, the Forth, the Clyde, the Tay, have framed its history. From their sources in the mountains to their great estuaries, they seem eternal. Our last treasure offers a trip into a world where everything was very different.
Is it very much further?
Yeah, no, we're nearly there. Just a couple of feet.
It was found by Bob Fotheringham and his friends out on the Tay River mudflats.
We decided to come down here, not knowing we had to come through reed beds, and met that stuff down there.
It's mud?
2.5 feet of it. So we had to wade it out. We started detecting on the banking and ring pools, cans. Then we came across this piece of wood sticking out. I walked past it, but Scott says, there's a wee curve to this.
What do you think it was?
I just thought it was a piece of wood. If we were in a hurry, I would have burnt it on a fire. But anyway, we came back and scooped a wee bit, and there was more curvature. And it started getting wider, wider, wider.
Did you realise at that time it was a boat?
Well, we had a good idea.
When you found out that it was a 3,000-year-old boat...
To find something like that is just fantastic.
What Bob and his friends had found was a log boat that's the same age as the Egyptian pyramids, a large canoe dug out from the trunk of a single oak tree. When the archaeologists arrived, they began the painstaking process of excavating it.
The boat was partly exposed, so the front end, the bow end of the boat was actually sticking out of the gravel bank. This was a problem because it was eroding away, and that's part of the reason why we had to excavate it. We looked at the stern end first of all, and we found it was incredibly well preserved.
It took them 7 days in total to excavate, taking advantage of tidal windows. Eventually, the boat was floated off and began to reveal its secrets.
Well, I think in terms of prehistoric logboats, it's one of the best preserved we have from the British Isles. One of the really unusual features we had were these footrests, which were carved out of the solid of the trunk itself, which are clearly where an oarsman or someone who's been paddling or punting the boat has stood at the back of the vessel. We had the moss caulking from 3,000 years ago still in place. We had tool marks on the transom, so we had lots of detail that told us exactly how people were building boats at this time.
15 metres long, rowed by paddle or punted with poles, the logboat could carry passengers or a cargo of nearly 2 tons up and down the tidal Tay. Archaeologists like David and Nick Dixon here claim that the logboat from Carpo was the juggernaut of the Bronze Age.
I don't know about you, but I'm sometimes a bit sceptical about the way archaeologists can take some object they've found and out of it build a whole elaborate picture of the way we once lived. Well, here on Loch Tay, they've built a faithful copy of the Carpo logboat to see how it works. And I'm going to have a go in it.
Just rocks a little when you get in. But...
OK. Well, it's not exactly the Oxford case.
The logboat's design is equally good for punting through shallow water or paddling in the deep water of lochs like this.
But this was the main way of travelling in those days because they had no roads.
Yeah. It's quite stable, isn't it? I mean, when I got in it, I thought if I do something silly, it's going to roll. But actually, it is quite stable.
But initially, it's a bit wobbly, but once you get used to it, it's actually quite a nice motion. And the other thing is, of course, if it does roll over, it's a log, so it's floating anyway.
It's not going to sink.
No.
You might, but it won't.
The logboat was a crucial tool for the people of ancient Scotland, who lived a much more amphibious life than we do, because back then, the landscape was quite different. In those days, the Tay flowed through a huge fen, now destroyed by drainage and dredging. And the logboat, made out of 15 metres of tall, straight oak tree, is itself evidence that the dry land was dominated by a giant forest.
It would have covered about 70% of the landscape we see here. Apart from the very rocky tops of the hills and the parts that were too boggy, most of this was this dark wildwood where oak trees were growing very closely together, they were growing straight and tall, and it's only because of that that they could build massive boats of this fashion.
Bronze Age people not only travelled by water, they lived on it too. This is a cranach. It's a house on an artificial island built out on stakes. The archaeologists have found 18 of them in Loch Tay, and this is a faithful reconstruction of one of them. and cranachs are found all over Scotland. People went on using them up until the 17th century AD. It's certainly homey, but it's huge and surprisingly sophisticated. For me, it offers a whole new vision into what Scotland was. A land not of crofters and peasants, but of watermen, fenmen, sailors. And it's a real insight into how modern man has radically altered the physical landscape of Scotland.
In our last series, we asked you to send us your finds, and our next item is about one of these. Imogen Rickman, a 9-year-old schoolgirl from the Isle of Wight, shares her discovery.
Did you come here knowing that you were going to look for treasure, or did you just happen to find it by chance?
Yeah, it was around here and poking out of the ground, and I just pulled it out and looked at it and said, wow, that's an interesting shape. I've never seen a piece of flint like that, and what's the pattern around the edge? And here it is.
You see, this is why you are a very clever girl, Imogen. So you spotted all these little chips in the side, and you
wondered
thought,
why it has that.
you thought, doesn't look just like an ordinary bit of stone.
Yeah.
Imogen made her extraordinary find in May 2012 here on Mersley Garlic Farm. How did you hear what it actually was?
Well, the archaeologist then phoned school. He said it was a Neolithic flint axe head, and apparently it's about 5,000 years old.
What did your friends at school think of the fact that you'd found it?
I thought it was really cool. Like, when I was in the newspaper, there was quite a lot of, wow, Imogen, you're going to be in the newspaper because you found this Neolithic flint axe head.
What Imogen had unearthed was a fragment of a flint axe head. I took her to see what a complete axe head would have looked like. Carl Lee has spent years mastering the ancient art of working with flint.
You can see it breaks very, very easily. But would you believe it's all about the use of angles?
Yeah.
And then I can switch over to my other hammer, and that is a red deer antler.
Very interesting that you're using antler, because you'd think that the flint would actually bite into that.
It does, and that's what makes it so effective. It gets hold of a nice thick section of the edge and takes off very thin pieces.
How does it feel to hold them in your hands?
It feels like I've got sort of a piece of history in my hand. It's really nice. It makes me feel closer to my ancestors.
People have been using stone tools in Britain for over 500,000 years. Around 5,000 years ago, when Imogen's axe head was made, Britain was covered with thick forest.
So perhaps what we can do now is compare the one that you found to the one that's just been made. So now you can see exactly what yours would have looked like.
Yeah, because sort of the end piece looks just like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Around 5,000 years ago, when Imogen's axe head was made, Britain was covered with thick forest. But our ancestors started to use their flint axes to cut down the trees and redefine the landscape, creating the patchwork of farm fields that we know as our green and pleasant land. The work of those pioneers who developed these simple, rather beautiful little tools meant that at last, men and women didn't just have to live off their wits or by chance in wooded environments like this, but they could settle down, they could farm. As a result, areas of wooded countryside became farmland for the first time. Imogen's axe head, along with other finds made here, show that this land had been farmed for 5,000 years, since the trees started to be cut down. And Colin Boswell is just the latest generation to harvest crops here. What evidence is there here of how those men and women affected this part of the landscape in the Stone Age?
The trees, they felled them with their axes, and they found they could grow crops up on the downs above us. And they got good crops very easily. Eventually it evolved into the modern farm landscape where we grow our garlic today.
From these farms, villages, towns, and then our great cities evolved.
So you could say that this little thing helped to give us the world as we know it. And it was found by a 9-year-old girl in a muddy field on a school trip.
It's easy to think when the Romans came here, they found the native Britons pretty primitive, a male-dominated barbarian society.
But actually, nothing could be further from the truth. And our next item, which is from Wales, is intriguing evidence of that story. Catherine Jenkins investigates.
In 2005, Brian Gibbonson, a French polisher, was walking in fields near Cardiff when he stumbled across some strange hoops of metal in the ground. Taking them to his local fines liaison officer, he was stunned to discover that they were part of a 2,000-year-old set of jewellery, but a section of one was missing. Then, years later, and an incredible coincidence, the missing link was found by another man, Peter Halford. The two finders had discovered the most important ancient jewellery ever found in Wales. I'm here at the National Museum in Cardiff to meet them both.
Brian, hi Catherine. Hi Peter, nice to meet you. So tell me, Brian, how did you find this item?
Big signal. And I thought, what's this? Straight down, about a foot down. The bronze collar started to appear. I stopped digging, brushed the soil away, and took it out of my hand.
How did you feel?
We knew it was important, but we didn't know exactly how important.
And so, Peter, you found the other half of the bracelet. That's remarkable. How did that happen?
Well, remarkably, this was several years later, and I found something. I thought, well, this is interesting. This looks a bit old. I didn't know what it was, first of all. So when I spoke to the museum about it, they were really astounded that that had turned up so many years later.
The Boverton hoard consists of a necklace and 2 bangles that were made by Welsh craftsmen 2,000 years ago during the Iron Age.
Wow, this is it.
This is the Boverton grave group.
It's absolutely gorgeous, but goodness me, it's tiny.
It is.
It's really quite intricate, isn't it? Can we look a little bit closer?
So you can see that it was decorated in the front with red glass enamel squares and yellow enamel in between.
Okay.
And then they had mirror plates on the back as well as the front there.
Okay, and this is the mirror plate here, is it?
Yes, it's a tinned bronze, which would have been quite shiny.
Okay.
Very grey, contrasting with the bronze.
And these colours would have been a lot more vibrant.
They would have been very red and very yellow.
This is a modern replica of what it would have looked like when it was brand new. And the jewellery hides a secret of Welsh history within its design.
This form of neck collar is something that's associated with Iron Age, with Celtic people before the Romans. But the decoration and some of the technology is very Romanised. So you've got this mixing of cultures.
So it's like a fusion of 2 different kinds.
Exactly. It's a cultural mixing, which is really important and really interesting for us.
The fusing of designs is the result of one of the most major events in Welsh history, the invasion of Wales by the Romans. In 48 AD, 5 years after they had invaded England, the Imperial Roman governor of Britannia ordered his troops west. For 30 years, they battled the spirited Welsh tribes before the Romans finally completed their conquest and took Cymru. So, who would have worn this jewellery and why? It's being modelled by a group of fashion students advised by Iron Age style guru Drew Felix.
With a piece like this, you want to show it off. So you'd probably raise the hair up to clear the neckline.
Oh, I can see now, because the very colourful part is on the back part of the necklace. If the hair was down, you would really miss that.
Exactly.
It's gorgeous. Who would have worn this?
Someone with immense power and wealth. You'll notice as well the clothes she's wearing, extremely colourful and bright. This is because the dyes are expensive and the time taken to make clothes expensive.
Its exquisite style and skilled craftsmanship show it would have belonged to a Welsh princess or warlord's wife and be worn as a symbol of her status.
So it's not just a fashion accessory then?
Not really, no, but then all fashion is a display of wealth and power to some extent. So it serves two purposes. It's effectively like driving around in a Porsche would be today. We've got the local traditions, but it's also mixed with the Roman cool. Much the same as today, we see kids in Africa in T-shirts and baseball caps. Because of the American culture, you've got much the same happening with the influence of the Roman Empire in Britain.
So what the Boverton jewellery tells us is that rather than fight Roman domination, the Welsh tribes cooperated with the Romans, sharing ideas as well as technology.
Perhaps it took a woman's intuition to know that there are more ways than war to impress and resist, to maintain their Welsh identity in the face of occupation.
Coming up, Mariana Cotter discovers treasures from a shipwreck that was once part of Nelson's fleet.
It's such a relatively small artefact, but to find it on the seabed, exactly where it fell in 1798, in the middle of a winter storm. It's artefacts like this that really bring this site to life.
Welcome back. Now, the British Museum has always aimed to showcase the most beautiful works of art from around the world to as many people as possible. This stunning collection of Greek vases, for example, many of which are nearly 2,500 years old.
The extraordinary thing is that some of them took 200 years to get here. That's because they were at the bottom of the sea, along with a host of other treasures. We sent Mariana Cotter to investigate.
Back in 1796, a British diplomat based in Italy, Sir William Hamilton, had gathered a collection of priceless artefacts for the British Museum. The only problem was how to get them home. So Hamilton's friend, Admiral Horatio Nelson, offered to give them a lift on one of his warships. So the priceless vases were loaded onto the 170-foot, 1,700-ton ship of the line, HMS Colossus. In the 1970s, the front section of the Colossus was found, and divers recovered ancient Greek pottery fragments. The British Museum restored a handful of the priceless ancient vases, dating from 440 BC. But they were only a small part of the treasure that was on board. Carpenter Todd Stevens is a scuba diver who spent years searching the area for shipwrecks. And in 1999, he made an extraordinary new discovery. More than half a kilometre away from the known Colossus site, Todd discovered a whole new section of the ship, with artefacts everywhere.
It just looked like a piece of rotten old iron, and it was the sort of thing I would have looked at and gone, rubbish.
After careful restoration, this object was revealed to be an 18th century flintlock pistol. Flintlock pistols were the workhorse of the Royal Navy and saw action for over 200 years, a vital weapon in the bloody action of boarding enemy ships.
Pretty much everybody went over the side with their cutlasses and their muskets and pikes and pistols. The officers quite often had two, and as they went over the side, they would disperse them first, and then they would spin them over like this and use as a club. And actually, if you hold that and feel the weight of that end.
That is terrifying, to think that you're on this massive wooden ship and you're that close to someone that you have to club them to death.
Yeah, it was pretty nasty stuff.
I'm going to take a dive to see where Todd found the pistol and discover what other treasures the wreck still contains.
We're going to dive the stern section, which is here. We shall go up and go along the guns that are standing up off the seabed.
They're still in situ, exactly where they landed when the ship first went down.
Exactly. So this hasn't been touched.
I can't wait to get down there and actually see it for myself.
The wreck of the Colossus is at a depth of 15 metres, just off the island of Samson.
This thing's sticking up in front of me. I think that's a cannon. Wow, look at that. Todd, that is cool. Wow, look at this. You can actually see it's like a ship laid flat onto the seabed. It's incredible to think that this timber is over 200 years old and she survived just in 15 metres of seawater. So normally on a site like this, one cannon itself would be amazing and quite a cool find. But I look 3 metres on and there's another cannon. Also sunk into the seabed, nose down.
The evidence at the wreck site helps us build up a picture of what happened to the Colossus in that fateful storm. The wind and waves pushed the mighty ship onto the rocks. She rolled onto her side, lost her masts, and the enormous hull was torn apart. The front bow section sank almost half a mile away from the rear stern section. Over the years, the superstructure has been broken down, leaving this slice of her stern, port side down, that we can still see today. The timbers and the pins that held her together are still clearly visible.
They are some serious spikes. Look at them just lying on the bottom.
These deadly-looking pins are a metre of solid copper. Thousands of them formed the skeleton that held Colossus's mighty frame together. The wreck of the Colossus is still being carefully excavated, and it continues to offer new discoveries.
Is that a musket? That's the trigger.
After 200 years submerged, this is an amazing find. Muskets like this would have been used with our pistol in the desperate fights to board enemy ships.
So this is the concretion, this is the seabed, sort of congealing together with the metal. So it's incredibly thick, but you know that the actual musket and the barrel are inside. And there's another one here. Wow. It's such a relatively small artefact, but to find it on the seabed, exactly where it fell in 1798, in the middle of a winter storm. It's artefacts like this that really bring this site to life, that really evoke a sense of what those sailors had to suffer. It's a good job they got to Samson, otherwise they'd be lying down here with the musket as well.
That was an awesome dive. Takes you a minute just to get your eye in, but once you start to see the detail, it's like the plan of a beautiful wooden 18th century ship just laid out on the seabed.
This is what you go diving for. Something like that is, there's nothing better in my book. Just touching it when you know the story behind a wreck like that. To touch that history is just something else.
The Colossus site is a protected wreck. You need a licence to dive it, and now it's illegal to remove any artefacts.
It's incredible to think that a ship the size of HMS Colossus, from the time of Napoleon and Nelson, lay there for over 200 years undiscovered. It reminds me that Britain is awash with treasures, and the treasures under the sea are the most secret of all.